Live and direct, live and I take no jive.
Legalize it.
So how much can a koala bear? Koala bear, koala bear. Koala bear. Barry pulls a joint out of his pocket. Bill says, "Great, Barry, a reefer."
Hi, and welcome back to the Koala podcast. And for the first time ever, and I'm very excited to do this, I'm speaking to a lawyer in Colombia. It's been years I've been trying to get somebody from Colombia to have a conversation with me. So I'm very excited to speak to Juliana Salazar, who actually is working now with Rudick Law Group out of New York, or RLJ. And if anybody who's listening to this knows the cannabis industry, they are the up and coming law firm. And I'm not doing a sort of like like a promo for them, but they really, they're the first one. I mean, firstly, is it all women law group? Yeah,
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Which is great. Which is probably why you're doing so well, because you don't have any stupid men. Which always helps. But I've just noticed that in terms of a law firm that people trust and people really like to work with, they're doing really, really well. So anyway, that's the end of my promo spot. They're not paying me any money for saying that, by the way. So I don't have any sponsors for this. So don't think that I'm saying that because I'm being sponsored by them. Juliana, thanks a lot for joining us. Firstly, I always say to people, just what's your background in law, and did you start in cannabis, or what drove you towards cannabis?
Sure. Well, thanks for the praise, Sean. I have a very particular history with cannabis just because I never thought I would be working, in what I work today and the way I do it today. When I graduated law school, I wanted to become a prosecutor for financial crimes. It was probably the one
That
thing
sounds like a fairly dangerous job to be doing in Colombia. I wouldn't
and
recommend that
yes,
to people.
it sounds like a movie job.
Yeah.
And I wasn't, I wasn't a huge fan of law to begin with. I come from a family of lawyers, and I ended up studying law. I wanted to be an artist, but I studied law for lack of a better idea. I ended up liking it, enjoying it, and then I wanted to become a prosecutor, and I got an opportunity to do it, but in one of Colombia's like hottest areas, in a very remote town. And I thought, this is just not, I'm probably not going to be able to do that. So I ended up
Well, I
working
imagine your
with,
your parents were overly
yeah.
pleased that you would be doing that either, would they?
Yeah. My parents were like, well, they didn't push me to say yes or no, but
Yeah.
I'm guessing they were very
Yeah.
happy that I ended up
No,
saying no.
that's
And it
like
was,
my nephew who wanted to join the Marines, and his mother and his, he went and did the test and failed, thank God. But his mother didn't say anything, but the relief on her
yeah,
face when he failed the test was palpable.
I know, thank God. I wasn't stubborn enough to choose that route. So I ended up working as a personal assistant for a British journalist, which was, a very non-traditional job. I had been rejected by a few law firms. So I just decided, I would rather be working than not. So I started working with him, and
So
he
that's
did a
interesting.
lot of.
Who can you say who he was working for?
Sure, his name's Matt Yuki. He is so he's a journalist, an advisor, a consultant, and now also a writer. We're very good friends now. But he was looking for someone to help him out with his business ideas, with his writing. So I did everything, from, write research to legal work, brewing coffee, everything. And eventually we did a lot of work on oil and gas and mining. So that industry started to struggle a lot in Colombia. So we had to think of, new ideas. And funnily enough, my mom, she's also a corporate attorney. She used to be a partner at a law firm. And one day she was like, "Hey, I spoke to some people in like the cannabis world. I wasn't aware that's a thing. Why don't you look at that? That might be interesting for you." And I was like, "Well, I wasn't aware that this was happening." They were just discussing the law in Congress in 2016. So we did some research on it. We were pretty good at writing by this point. We understood, how to do business in Latin America. I spoke English and Spanish. My boss didn't speak a lot of Spanish, but he understood the continent very well. So we were like this power couple, and we decided to start a newsletter, which was the Colombia Cannabis Investor. So we started doing some research and helping people understand what was going on. There was a lot of confusion. Like I can't tell you how wild this
Well,
was in
look,
20.
I remember because I tried to understand it when I
Yeah.
first started writing in 2015, and I was in the States, and that was confusing enough. And then I started looking at Mexico and Colombia, and just I'm not a Spanish speaker either, and I just found it absolutely impossible to work.
Yeah.
The only thing I could really read was a press release by somebody who was supposedly starting a business, but you never really knew if that was reality or
Yeah.
not.
Everyone was doing press releases and everyone was doing capital raises for, $100 million for licenses that didn't really exist. We didn't even know how licenses worked back then. So I met a lot of people who said, I want to get a license to export like THC products to California. And people weren't aware that you can't do that in Colombia or in anywhere in, the entire world. So there was a lot of confusion. There was a lot of Canadian companies looking to, get lower production costs. The whole 12-hour sunlight, no seasons argument was very, very trendy. But at the end of the day, because of a series of different reasons, I'm going to say lack of information, a lot of high valuations, and people claiming they were going to change the world with cannabis, become millionaires in a
Well,
second.
look, it's a standard gold rush. They happen in every country, and it's
Exactly.
funny. I'm noticing just this week, and a couple of people have sent me emails, and they're all just going France, France, France. Nothing's
Yeah,
happening.
everyone's going France now.
I
Yeah.
know, but nothing's happening. And if anybody has half a brain, if they know about French bureaucracy, it's like I don't. They just rush from one little gold mine to another one, don't they?
Everyone does it, yeah. And it was very frustrating because at some point I did think this was going to be an interesting opportunity because Colombia has been known for exporting raw materials and then having those raw materials, acquire more value in other countries, and then we get off having a smaller piece of the cake when we could have done the whole process in-house and, become a country that is more specialized. So cannabis was kind of promising to be that. And we had attention from big figures. Snoop Dogg came to Colombia, like we had this huge
Again,
we
he was everywhere at the time. You don't see
he
him
was
so
everywhere.
much now. He's too busy with Olympics and stuff, I think.
Yeah, I think he's too busy attending the Olympics. Yeah,
Yeah.
but we were, our hopes were up. And at the end, a lot of companies ended up making huge investments here. And then the pandemic hit, and we started to see the downfall of everything. So after the pandemic, we weren't able to attend any events, obviously. So my business was pointless. Our newsletter was pointless with no events and with no traction. So we had to shut it down. And by that point, I had already met a cannabis company that was starting in Colombia, and they asked me to come as their attorney, and I ended up becoming a partner with them. So I built, something from scratch when I was an advisor for people who were doing that. So I had the experience of
And
understanding.
when the market was at the bottom, so to speak.
It was kind of stabilized. I'm gonna say it
Yeah.
was like a midpoint, because there were not that many licenses. There was still some hope and some interest, but we had fascinating partners in Germany. We met great people in Canada. Like I thought for a moment we did have a chance, but it was just too complicated. We were trying to do something. What we were trying to do was basically grow cannabis at a reasonable price in Colombia with very, very high quality and then send it to Germany. So it was prescribed for, 5-year-olds with epilepsy. And I'm no doctor by any means. I'm no quality expert by any means. So, and neither were my partners. So we were very naive in thinking that we could do this alone, so to speak, with external advisors and in Germany, which is probably the toughest place in the world to do business
Well,
because
they
of the
do again, bureaucracy to to the nth
yeah.
degree.
I had no idea it was that tough. I had no idea it was that expensive. So at some point, I do think the cultural difference was just way too wide for us. And we did raise capital. We did, get some interesting um, advances. We understood the plant. we got to a certain quality level, but at some point we just had to shut down a part of the operation. The Colombian operation is still alive and it's doing well. It's moving into medical THC now, but this is years after. It took us almost 10 years to reach to that conclusion and to get to that level of quality because no one realizes that it's so expensive and it's so difficult that you're starting to compete with medical companies. And is that something you really want to do? Do you really want to compete with pharmaceutical companies? At some point, I told myself I don't. That's not why I started this. I don't believe in pharmaceutical cannabis. I believe in cannabis as a medicine for anyone who needs it and safe access for users. So I also didn't, end up believing in our business model, but that was the only legal thing we
So
could
look,
do.
that leads
So
me into asking you a couple of basics about Colombia for listeners.
sure.
Regulation, legislation in Colombia. Uh, what is it legislated for? Personal use or just medical use?
So we have sort of three pillars in Colombia.
The three pillars.
The three pillars, yes, it's a very lawyer-like answer.
Yeah.
The first one is personal use. So in personal use, you have what you can have at home. You can have up to 20 plants at home and just use them for personal use. There's no law that states that except for case law from the Constitutional Court. So that is
And
something the Constitutional Court
if you
decided.
try and sell it, what happens?
You would be in the criminal area.
And
You would be
if you give it away to somebody, what happens?
so there's a lot of
Which is why I'm
gray
asking.
area. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's something similar to Mexico.
Yeah.
So there's nothing that says you can't give it away for free, but 20 plants is a lot.
No,
So I'm
it's
guessing
not a small amount, no.
it's not a small amount, not for personal use. So everyone thinks when this was issued by the Constitutional Court in the 90s, if I'm not mistaken, they didn't really understand how much 20 plants could yield. So at the end, a lot of people still have the plants at home and they just share it around with friends or whatnot, or just do it under the
So
table.
does
And
that automatically negate a domestic sales market like they have in the US? Because everybody can, most people can
well,
grow, or is it like the US, urban areas, people don't have the time nor the energy to do that sort of thing, so they'd rather go and buy in a shop.
exactly, exactly. I think it's very few people who do it, to be honest
Yeah.
with you. It's people who really, really care about the plant and really want to do it. Like, to be honest with you, I tried to have a few plants at home and it was quite complicated. The city I live in is not warm. It's a little bit cold, so the plants suffered a lot. They were stressed. They started to die, and I just said, I can't, I would just rather someone else deal with
Deal
this.
with it, exactly. Well, no, fair enough. So there is a system. Do they call it a dispensary system in Colombia?
So not yet, because adult use is still not legal in Colombia. So you can have your plants at home. That's the first thing you can do. And then you can also carry around 20 grams of cannabis with you on the street. So if you were on the street and you had 20 grams of cannabis and you were, for whatever reason, stopped by a police officer, you can claim those 20 grams are yours and are for personal use. That's also acceptable for 1 gram of cocaine and 5 grams of hash. So that's something you can always claim, so to speak. And then the third thing you have is medical cannabis, which is basically doctors are allowed to prescribe medicine as in pills, as in strict formulations. Then you also have what we called magistral formulas, which are a very complicated thing, to be honest with you, but essentially these are like tailored formulations for every patient. So it works a lot with dermatology, for example, where you have a very particular skin condition and your dermatologist will say, Here's your formula, go to a lab and
Do it for
they'll fabricate a cream specially for you." So we have the same thing with cannabis. The thing is that's obviously not profitable and very complicated because there's not that many research to, substantiate all those formulations. So there's been a thing where standard formulations are just prescribed by doctors and the labs issue a lot of units for standardized formulations. So, 1-to-1 ratios of CBD to THC, for example, stuff we know already works. So that's not covered by all insurances, unfortunately. So it's not reaching a big piece of the population. And recently, the government legalized dry flower. So now doctors can prescribe dry flower, whether it's CBD or THC, whatever it is. And we're still waiting on a more specific regulation on how that's going to be handled with pharmacies, because we have, like, the standard pharmacy, the standard drugstore, but I'm not sure if they have, the knowledge or the tools to be able to handle dry flower, because extracts are pretty fair and easy, but dry flower is its own specific thing. So we're still waiting on that. But I'm unsure what's going to happen next. We're still waiting on presidential elections this year. We've had
And you're
about
getting
15
lot
attempts.
of pressure from up north as well, aren't you, on current politics? So that doesn't make, and by design, they want, because of what everybody else knows Colombia for, they just think that, the place is a basket case, and they want, I presume, the idea of making it easier to access for the domestic market cannabis in a regulated way is not really a conversation that many people want to talk about at the moment.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And the safe access argument doesn't go that far along as I would hope it does. So the times when I think it's been like 15 times when we've tried to legalize adult use cannabis in Congress, and Congress always reaches a very difficult conclusion, and it's that cannabis is more dangerous than the dangers of not legalizing drugs. So there's also religion in there, there's also values, there's also a matter of.
Is there pressure from the black market and money in the black market that make so much money and it's fairly involved with politics that they can basically tell politicians not to vote in one way or the other as well?
I think it does. Yeah, I think with medical cannabis it didn't, because everyone understood that it was going to be very different. But with recreational cannabis, I'm not sure what could happen, because I haven't met a single person who has said to me, I am having trouble with the black market. But when it comes to actually legalizing and, facing the reality of competing against people who have also been doing this for
70 years,
decades,
80 years.
exactly 70 years,
Yeah.
exactly. Everything starts to change a little bit.
I
And
mean, that's the silly thing in the US as well, when they, back in the 2015, 16, huge black market. Of course there is. And then everybody thought, their thing is, oh, well, you've regulated it so that can get rid of the black market in the next 18 months. And then when that doesn't happen, oh, that's a good reason to ban cannabis. I mean, it's a sort of complete catch 22 argument. You create a prohibition market, you militarize it for that period of time, you're not going to get rid of it.
you're not going to get rid of it. Like, it's not going to happen. Now, some users are going to move from the black market into the legal market. Yes, some people are going to do it, but not the majority
Yeah,
of the
well, the middle
people.
classes and the ones who can afford to, but everybody else is just going to carry on as normal, aren't they?
Exactly. And also there's, the violence component that I think that's one of the things that Colombia struggles with the most, because one thing is to have drug production, or to have, troubles with economy, or to have poverty, or whatever you want to call it. But then the real trouble we have is violence. And the real reason I think people can be afraid of legalizing cannabis at a rural level, and I don't think cities are going to face this as much, but in the rural areas where cannabis production is known to be abundant in the black market, is they're scared of what's going to happen.
Yeah,
They're
well,
scared
it's a
if.
rural area. Everybody knows everybody else's business. So if
Exactly.
you're not doing the right, and that's the same anywhere in the world. So I mean, that combination of of the existing politics, some sort of fairly conservative Catholicism, and a violent black market doesn't make it easy, does it?
Absolutely. It doesn't make it easy at all. And the obvious ties to the US government also don't make it easy. Colombia is probably the biggest US ally in this side of the world. We have the biggest embassy, and inevitably we have to follow their lead. So I think we're always put in a hard spot where I do think Colombia has a lot of opportunity to do many different things and, change the narrative of what we're known for. And that's something I'm really trying to work hard for, but it's difficult when you can't control
So is that the
99%.
reason you've connected with these guys in New York and joined the firm to see how to yeah, I presume it's like anything in this world. It's the same for me every day. Every conversation, there's more gray than there is anything else. And if anybody
Yeah.
says that they know everything or even something, they're either got a very large ego or they're lying. Um, how how are you going to start that process working with the firm?
So I think it's a very slow burn process where we have to face like the cultural differences first, even though, we're from the same side of the world and there's a lot of similarities on the way we do business, our values. From the moment I met Lauren, I knew we were aligned in our values and I knew I wanted to work with her eventually. But the world we live in is very different. So what I've been trying to do for the past few weeks is start by talking to them a lot about how we see the world down here, what the real challenges are, and what we can promise clients who are interested in South America and specifically in Colombia, because many people don't know the clinical trials opportunities here are huge because of the patient base, because our population is so diverse, because of the costs, because of the reputation, because, many different things that people don't see Colombia for, or tourism is a huge thing I really want to get more involved in because I do think there's more ethical ways of doing tourism, even whatever it is, even if it's retreats or just plain tourism. So I do think it starts with everyone trying to understand more about the country. I don't think people know that much about Colombia besides the obvious and what goes on in the news, obviously, but I don't think people.
All I've been told, as I think I said to you in the past, is anybody I've known who's visited, it's the most beautiful country in the world, and you must visit. So at some point,
Thank you for that.
I'm
Yes.
desperate to get on a plane because honestly, I've said friends have been all over the world and said you really cannot understand the beauty of the place until you're there.
Yeah, I think it's a very unique place, and I think that there's a lot more, access to traveling to South America now. There's more resources, there's more people talking about it. I do think Hispanic culture is trendy now, so a lot more people speak Spanish. I found myself in Thailand, for example, speaking in Spanish and people understanding me. And I'm like, why does everyone suddenly want to speak Spanish? But I love that. I think it's lovely, it's amazing, and I want to take advantage of that in a good way to sort of exploit all the good of Colombia in a way that is great for the country, in the way that we can keep some of that economy. And I would wish cannabis was a part of that, but we just have to be patient, and that's also a reason
And
why
how
I'm trying
And how does
bringing clients.
how do you feel Colombia will interrelate with other South American? I'm thinking more of Brazil and Argentina, who are
Yeah.
trying to get a medic some sort. Is equally confused, but they are trying to set up some sort of medical rules,
Yeah.
regulations, and bodies to manage. Is there a discussion between those countries, or not really at the moment?
So I don't know of anything very specific, but it's also because Brazil is it really is its own thing. It really is, part of our continent, but a very different market, very protective of their own, a huge, massive, a different language, and that already is a huge barrier for us. So I do remember at some point Brazil has always tried to legalize, whatever is happening in South America. So when it was cosmetics, it was cosmetics. Then it was the magistral formulas. They tried to do the same thing. Now they're trying to legalize medical cannabis, and I really hope they do because their regulatory agency is quite interesting. It's very complicated, but I think if they can manage to get some sort of understanding with them of the type of products they can produce, they are way ahead of other South American countries. But yeah, it's difficult for us to interact with them and them with us. And then Argentina has been trying for so long, but their economy is just so complicated to understand. It's so difficult to penetrate that I know it's improved somewhat. There's also a lot of social issues. So I think Colombians, and I'm going to be very bold in saying this, but I do think Colombians have said we're just going to try to solve our own troubles before looking at someone else's.
So if you're working with companies who are looking for export markets, you're really at this stage of the proceedings, you're really looking at Europe, aren't you?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. We were looking, so for the medical market, Europe was the biggest thing, and Germany was the biggest, is still the biggest importer in the world. So we used to look a lot into Europe and particularly Germany, Switzerland, because we have the same THC percentage, 1% different from the rest of Europe and the US. And then now that they're trying to legalize recreational cannabis, it's interesting to see because they're taking teeny tiny baby steps, but that might be the best thing they can do. Just because it's risky, it's complicated, it's uncertain, and now Germany and the Czech Republic is also trying to do the same thing into sort of legalizing personal use and having a few plants at home and seeing how that goes before going fully recreational. So I think Europe is still a huge market for us. Australia is also another one,
Well,
just because.
well, you better keep an eye on the TGA this week because
Okay.
they're coming down like a hammer very soon. I think on a lot of imports. There's been a lot of people bending the rules somewhat, and I think Australia is much more conservative than people would like to think from the outside. And they sort of let it loose in a lesser fashion than Thailand. But
Yeah.
the crows are coming home to roost, so to speak. And I think things are going to get tightened up very, very quickly there. I did have another question. Sort of same plant, but jump. Industrial hemp is always a really big thing for me because it seems the most obvious industry that can work to employ people. You don't have the issues with the THC, all these. Does Colombia talk about industrial hemp?
So we did have a lot of conversations around industrial hemp because we did think that, having loads of hectares in areas such as like the center and south of Colombia with great radiation was going to be, you know, a dead giveaway for hemp. But unfortunately, there's like more, I'm going to say agronomical challenges with industrial hemp. So because of the extension, we only have 12-hour days. We don't have 18-hour days at any point of the year. So we would have to do a lot of extra lighting on the plant for it to actually grow to the levels of industrial hemp. So that was the first challenge. And then outdoor growing in Colombia was just very complicated. It's too humid for the plants.
Okay.
And if temperatures change, especially in this side of the country in the center, if temperatures change drastically, most of the plants are going to be suffering a lot. So at the end of the day, I met a few people who tried to do it and who had 1,000 hectares, 700 hectares, or
Right. And
whatnot.
that's not a
But
small amount of land either, is it?
yeah, yeah, it was way too expensive. At the end of the day, industrial hemp is meant to be cheaper. It's meant to be, yeah, industrial. But it just didn't work out for the Colombian climate conditions. I wish there was, a way to modify the strains or have something, in the genetic side of things that could improve that situation. But I don't know of anyone who's doing that level of research in Colombia. I know it's in the Netherlands, in the US, but not here.
So if we're having this conversation this time next year, what will have changed? Anything?
That's a good question. I mean, I think it depends a little bit on what happens with the elections, but then again, I'm gonna say probably nothing is gonna change just because I think it's still gonna be a slow burn, and I still think that maybe we might see more people having access to dry flower as medicine, which would be, for me, a huge step forward. But other than that, in terms of, very different regulatory schemes or huge regulatory changes, I'm not entirely sure, but I would anticipate to see more people taking advantage of other opportunities adjacent to the cannabis industry. So I would like to see more people doing research now here or investing on clinical trials. That's something I would love to see. But in terms of regulations themselves, I think, the framework is pretty robust as it is. It works very well. It's just a matter of understanding the limits and the gray areas. People want to do things that unfortunately can't be done in any part of the world. And maybe because Colombia is, yeah, flexible because of our history with drugs, people may think, yeah, well, we can get away with this, but no, you can't.
Yeah.
So I would hope that that still, stays in
I
people's
mean, do
minds.
you see yourself, you're less of a deal lawyer and more of an education lawyer, really, is your role at the moment?
Definitely. I love to be an educational lawyer. And my average client doesn't speak Spanish or doesn't understand Colombia and wants to do not necessarily cannabis. They want to buy a house, they want to invest in real estate, they want to start their business, they want to hire Colombians. And I have no trouble in sitting, for hours in the bank to help them open an account. I have no trouble with going to the Chamber of Commerce. I'm not ashamed of doing non-attorney things for my clients and helping them, because at the end of the day, what I want to do, and I think what all of my jobs and my failed businesses and failed ideas have led me to, is to understand that that's
Well, you're
what
not the
I
only one.
want.
Don't worry on that. Look, we don't have
Yeah.
long. Yeah, we don't have long to go, but there's one final question because I'm having a lot of these conversations at the moment.
Sure.
The rise of the psychedelics treatment market, of which quite a
Yes.
lot of that is happening in your part of the world, where very wealthy Californians come down to stay in a resort and be fed stuff by normally fake shamans who are there to reel in the money. Are you fine? Are you engaging with any of that? Is that sort of crossing your path? And do you see that? What does government think of it, for example, in Colombia? They think, oh, it's tourist money, we'll take it, or they're sort of slightly not too sure about it?
I mean, yes, I am getting into that sector, or I'm gonna call it industry, because it really is an industry where people pay a lot of money to be fed mainly ayahuasca and go to
Yeah, that's what
ceremonies.
it seems. Yeah.
That's what it seems like. And, it's fascinating to me because I'm not sure who's a shaman, who's not. That's very difficult to know because there's no shaman card, there's no
No,
shaman
exactly.
license.
You don't go to
You have
university
to
to
like
become a
test.
shaman, do you?
Exactly. So I'm starting to get into that because I do see a lot of risks for everyone involved. And I don't want to say, I hate to see only the bad side of things. I try to be the attorney who also says there's opportunity here or there's room for improvement. So I am trying to understand it a little bit better. I am meeting new attorneys who are getting involved in it. But ultimately, I think the government is just saying, listen, so long as no American dies, we're fine. If everyone's if everyone wants to do this freely, and we have a few shamans here and there, like things have happened, especially in Peru. There's been claims of like sexual assault and whatnot.
Well,
So,
that's right. I
I
mean, look,
mean,
I've literally had this conversation 3 times over the past 2 days, and with North Americans who have been in the psychedelic world since the 60s, so the older generation, and they're getting,
yeah.
somewhat nervous and upset about it because they can see they've been through the cycle before, and they see what comes after this sort of behavior.
Yeah. And what comes after can be very prejudicial and very complicated for indigenous communities.
Exactly,
So,
exactly.
I mean, I do think it's very concerning. And when I've met Californians and Canadians and Germans who come here and pay $5,000 for a retreat, I think, are you not afraid of doing that? Are you not scared of giving away all your money to someone you
Yeah,
have
I
no
wouldn't go anywhere
idea?
near it, to be honest
I
myself.
would never, I would, and I'm Colombian, and that's also because, I know people have a very close relationship with psychedelics. It's different than cannabis, but I mean, it's a little bit nerve-wracking, but I will have more news on that, as I
Well,
get to
I'd
work
love to
more.
talk to you a full podcast about that later in the year, maybe, because that would
Yeah,
really interesting conversation. Look, we're almost out of time, so Juliana, thank you very much for being on the Karma Koala podcast and really, educating me. This is the main reason I do the podcast because I learn stuff. Hopefully, the listeners learn stuff as well. But I've really learned a lot today, so thank you very much.
of course, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me. It was great, and I hope to see you soon.
Live and direct, live and I take no jive.
Legalize it. So how much can a koala bear? Koala bear, koala bear. Koala bear. Barry pulls a joint out of his pocket. Bill says, great, Barry, a reefer.